In this section of what to know before you go, we're going to be talking about knowing who you're talking to. Before you come to Washington, D.C., I hope you'll take a look at 3 things about your elected officials. First of all, their background. Secondly, their policy interests. And finally, where they are on the political spectrum. How do you find all that out? Well, I'm glad you asked. There are 4 sites I hope you'll take a look at before you come to DC. www.house.gov is where you can learn a little bit about your elected officials in the U.S. House of Representatives. When you scroll down to the middle of the page, you'll see that you can choose your representative under the drop-down menu. If you're not 100% sure who they are, that's totally fine. Just type in your zip code. And sometimes they'll ask you for your full street address because they want to make sure that you're connected to the right person. Now, in this case, we're going to assume that your member of Congress is Mr. Mo Brooks. When you land on the site, you'll see that every legislator has a different page. And sometimes the navigation bars are different, sometimes the structure is different. Just be prepared for that. I'm going to show you some of the things that you can look for and some of the words that might be of use to you. So first of all, I said learn a little bit about them. So you'll see that there's often a tab that says About Me. It might say Biography. But when you click on that, you should get to a usually pretty short overview of their interests, their background, their past work. This is always very good to read before you come into the office. Now, I also said it's good to know a little bit about their policy interests. Sometimes there'll be something up on the top that says policy interests or legislation. In this case, the very specific bills that this congressperson has introduced is under the About Me tab. When you get to that page, you'll see information about their current votes, but you may also see something that says legislation I've sponsored. This will take you to the congress.gov website. I strongly suggest that you take a look at sponsored legislation. If you look at co-sponsored bills, you'll probably have thousands of bills to look at. But in this case, you can see it's been narrowed down to 30. When you scroll through, you'll see some of the things that this legislator really cares about. All of these important issues are things you should know about before you come into the office so that you can, if possible, frame your message in a way that resonates with them. Now, I also said it's good to know where they are on the political spectrum. And the best way to find that out is to find something that looks like issues. It may, in this case, say legislative work. And you can see there's statements on a huge variety of issues. I suggest that you read through these even if it's not related to your issue. So that's how you learn a little bit about them, through reading their biography, through looking at some of the bills that they've introduced, and by learning where they are on the political spectrum. Don't feel like if they're a Republican and you're a Democrat, they're not going to pay attention to you. Their main concern is constituency. So as long as you can make that connection by letting them know that you're a constituent, that you're from their area, that you know constituents, something that demonstrates that local concern. For your senators, you're going to do something very similar at senate.gov. When you get to this page, go to the drop-down menu at the top where you can find the senators from your state. If you don't know what your state is, well, you got a bigger problem, but hopefully you do. And you'll see we picked Florida as an example. When you click on that link, you'll get to a list of the 2 legislators, the 2 senators from that state. I'd also mentioned congress.gov as a site to take a look at. Usually you'll be able to access the bills that your legislators have introduced from their web pages. But if you feel like going that extra mile, learning a little bit more about Congress, and seeing bills that other members of Congress have introduced, you can take a look at congress.gov. Just scroll down to the middle of the page, and you can select either a specific representative or a specific state and take a look at the legislation from all of those legislators. So here we're using Congresswoman DeLauro as an example. You can see why I said to look at their sponsored legislation. You can see the co-sponsored legislation. If we looked at that, that'd be about 5,000 bills. So if you narrow it down by clicking on sponsored legislation, That will give you fewer bills to look at. You can further narrow it down by looking at the current congressional session. And all of a sudden, instead of 5,000, we have 47. Again, you don't need to read all of these bills. Just take a look at some of the titles. You might, by clicking on the link, look at some of the summaries. Again, it just gives you a sense of some of the things that are very, very important to that particular legislator. Finally, I mentioned votesmart.org. This site's got a lot of background information on your legislators. So I'm going to go ahead and take a look at a member here. And you'll see that once that name comes up, you can click on these folders. And here you can learn a lot more about that legislator. In the biographical background, you'll see that there's details on political experience, committees, professional experience, etc. You can also, if you want to, take a look at their speeches. These are various things that they have said recently, particularly publicly, but sometimes if they've posted something on their website, that will be up there too. I also think you should take a look at the ratings pages. You'll see hundreds of organizations that have rated elected officials on their votes on a variety of issues. In this case, you can scroll down to find your own issue. You probably don't want to read through every single one. And take a look if there's any particular votes that he or she has been quote-unquote scored on. And that's it. If you've looked for your House members at house.gov, your senators at senate.gov, and this background information at votesmart.org, you're going to be far more prepared than most people who come to Washington, D.C. And for that extra gold star, you can go to congress.gov, learn a little bit about how the U.S. government works, and take a look at the longer list of bills that your legislators have co-sponsored or sponsored.